Hello, my fellow enthusiasts, and welcome to the third day of TCotC week. Today's theme is a TCotC Q&A. Everybody in the Discord server had the opportunity to ask me questions about TCotC. It could be anything related to like its development or its in-universe kind of stuff. So, I'm just going to be reading these off. I've got quite a few, and I'll just be personally answering them for you guys. So, the first question is, how did these animal people come to be? Well, they were just always there. They sort of just evolved alongside humans in the universe of TCotC. Next question. Can Kenny be seen by everyone in his ghost form, or are there, like, limitations to it? Kenny cannot be seen by anybody. He can be seen, like, through mirrors and everything like that. That's actually how Solaris, like, first, sees Kenny. He's standing next to a mirror, and Kenny is, like, floating behind him, and it's just this cute interaction of Solaris going, like, "What?" And he turns around, and he can't see anything, but Kenny's there in the mirror, and so that's really just the only way Kenny is able to show himself at first to people who are in-universe. We, as, like, the comic readers, can see Kenny and what he does, and, you know, his cute little shenanigans before he can talk and everything, but yeah, that's how he first appears to Solaris and everybody else. He can appear in, like, reflections and things, so he could not only appear in a mirror, but he could also appear, like, in, like, the surface of a pond or something like that. Next question. Can Ace transform every time into a manticore, and how did he get such a power like that? Ace is a monster. He's always been like that. He actually changes himself to look more like a sapient than he changes into a monster. So, like, he's always been a monster. That's who he is on the inside. That's his true form. He just disguises himself to look like, you know, a regular person, essentially. Well, as regular as an animal person can be, but you get the idea. Are there other types of animal people, like reptile, avian, aquatic, etc.? Yeah. I explained this in the lore video. There are reptiles, birds, not a lot of aquatic ones. I haven't thought about aquatic mammals, because the thing with sapiens is that they're all vertebrates. So, like, you don't have insects or anything like that, but you also don't have any fish sapiens. So, maybe you would have whale sapiens, since you would have, like, there would have to be some kind of evolution point where, like, reptiles would obviously be sapiens, and then everything that's kind of like a mammal-like reptile and eventually a mammal would be a sapien. This is kind of hard to wrap my own head around. In short, I'm just gonna go ahead and say there's no sapiens in the underwater, and the only ones that are capable of flight, I believe, don't quote me on this, are birds. And I say don't quote me on this even though I'm the creator, because I could easily change my mind later if I think of something significant, but I mean, there's obviously, like, griffins and things like that, but those kind of fall in between birds and mammals, and griffins are considered monsters, so I'm just, yeah, reptiles, birds, mostly just terrestrial vertebrates, like I said. Oh, and Kari's screaming in the background, that's great. Next one. If there are animal people, does that mean there are no longer feral animals? Yes, there are feral animals. So the weird thing is you can see, like, a normal wolf next to, like, a wolf sapient too. That's simply because, like, they've just evolved that way and things like that. I can't really explain it any further than that. I know that's kind of some weird logic, but it's just all I got for you. Are there still exists some okay. This one's worded a little weird, I'm sorry. Do humans still exist, and how big are they on the population? Okay, so do humans still exist, and how big is their population? Humans, like I said, are in the world of Altrea that TCotC takes place in. I just don't draw them, because I suck at drawing them. They are there. I would go ahead and say they about equal the amount of animal people that make up the sapients on Altrea, so, yeah. Okay. Are there other gods out there besides the Egyptian gods that have had any influence in this world? Yes. Their existence, however, is only hinted at. When you include, like, a group of gods, like the Egyptian gods, you have to take into account that there are probably other gods out there, too. And so, like, you have pantheons, like, obviously the Greeks. You know, everybody likes the Greek gods and stuff. And then you've got stuff like the Norse gods. You've got Mesoamerican deities. All those guys are there. They just play nowhere near the same role in the story because the Egyptian gods are just so closely tied to the story. Their existence is hinted at, saying, just like, oh, are there others out there? But, yes, there are, but you'll never see them because I'm not including them in the story. Okay, next question. Oh boy, here we go. Can I pet Solaris and Kenny and maybe Ace? I'm sure they'd be fine with that. Ace would literally kill you. No, he wouldn't. I guess you could. I mean, Kenny certainly wouldn't complain, but he can't touch anybody, so he'd kind of just cry on the inside and say, oh, it's okay. Solaris would kind of be weirded out, and Ace would not let you touch him, period. Anubis McBus driver. Okay. Kari, hush, honey. Shh. Alright, what happens to Infernals when they die? Is it possible for them to come back to life? Could Charlie and Dave be revived? There is no possibility for Infernals to, like, be resurrected in a weird way. When they die, they just basically release all of their mana into the environment, and they are permanently dead. They don't really have souls. They're soulless creatures purely made out of mana, so when they die, they basically just dissipate into pure mana. What is shiny? Like, is he darkness or something even? Why shiny looks like a noodle doggy for me? I think there's a little bit of confusion here. The new villain, even though they will be featured in the animatic Project Shiny, their name is not Shiny. Their name is Torrent, and my closest friends have probably immediately turned their heads because they know who he is. His name is Torrent. He is, oof. I gotta save this one for the character profile coming out for him, because I'm supposed to tell you guys all about him when he comes out and stuff like that, so I'm gonna hold off on this question, I'm sorry. Alright. Are the stations you made a map of genuinely the only places with people still living, or are there scattered folks out there? Okay, so on my website, you guys might have seen the map of GDF stations. Those are specifically areas where the GDF has established stations. That does not mean that people are not still living out there. People can survive out there. It's just obviously really, really hard to survive outside of the military presence of the GDF. The stations that are marked on the map, those are the only places that the GDF has, like, established strongholds. So I guess you could kind of view those as, like, the major cities left in the planet or something like that. I'm not really sure how to explain that. But yes, in short, there are places with people still out there that are different from the stations. How advanced is the technology in TCotC? It's modern technology. It's like our everyday technology. It's not futuristic, it's not ancient, it's modern technology. So, you know, you can have things like a smartphone or an AK-47 or something like that. And very importantly, they also have power hoses. Like I was mentioning in the lore video, water is like the one thing that stops Infernals. So powered hoses are actually one of their choice weapons. And, oh, that ties into the next question here. What kinds of weapons do the characters fight against the Infernals with? Yeah, they use stuff like hoses a whole lot, when they need to fight a lot at once. And that's like, if the Infernals are, like, charging at the walls of a station, usually there will be GDF soldiers on top of the wall spraying a power hose down on the Infernals to keep them from breaking in. When it comes to, like, close quarters, or when you're not, when you don't have the safety of, like, the stronghold, they use all number of weapons. So, like, Ace, for instance, aside from using his monster powers, he also has a pistol. Solaris is terrible with guns, but he's okay with like a bow and arrow because of, you know, he's from ancient Egypt and everything like that. And he also uses a sword because that's just what naturally fits in his hand and things like that. You can use magic, obviously, but almost nobody knows how to use magic, so nobody for a very long time in the comic is going to be using magic against the Infernals. Okay, what are Infernals and where are they coming from? And can Infernals be tamed? Okay, so I've already answered the whole Infernal question in the lore video of TCotC, so I'm gonna go ahead and answer the second half of this question. Can they be tamed? No, they cannot be tamed. Once again, they actually don't have souls, and they don't have, like, they don't really behave outside of, like, a basic desire to eat things, essentially, I guess you could say. They're not like animals, they're just beings of pure mana, so there's really no way to control them outside of mana signals. So, that plays a huge part in the story, and I will talk about that more later, when I reveal the villain, who I've already dropped the name of, Torrent. When I talk about Torrent more later, with Project Shiny's debut, I will talk more about how he and the Infernals interact with each other. And, you probably could not pet an Infernal, because, I see that as a sub-question here. You cannot pet an Infernal because, your hand would catch on fire. I mean, if you want to pet fire, you're welcome to, but, that doesn't sound very smart to me. Okay. What do people do for recreation and fun in this dystopian wasteland? Dystopian, can I read? I'm sure they can do all sorts of things. A lot of people in the strongholds are kind of just scraping to get by. There are still some books and things like that. Not everything was burned by the Infernals. People were smart enough to pack up things like that. So some people read books, other people tell stories and things like that. A lot of the modern technology has kind of stopped working because obviously when you lose power plants and things like that, it makes having worldwide electricity a lot harder. But there are electrical areas, so I'm sure that some very, very, very wealthy people in GDF could manage to have like a TV or something. That's not normal. That's not really normal for people to have, though. They might have public TVs, some things like that. Usually those sorts of things would be reserved for the military and not for recreational purposes, but as like doubling as a monitor for like a camera or something. Like they have to repurpose a whole lot of equipment and things like that. So, and even if they did manage to get a TV to work, they couldn't like watch television or anything like that because all of the major networks obviously went to shit after, you know, the world turned to the apocalypse. So they could probably watch movies with DVDs and things like that, but almost nobody has access to that sort of thing. Children will be children and will play games together. Yeah. How much can Kenny lift? Like, he's a ghosty boy, so is there a limit to what he can pick up? Or can he interact with everything and no one knows it's him? Kenny can interact with the world around him. It's a little strange how things work. Obviously in Chapter 1, he is seen picking up a blanket and throwing it over Solaris. He can basically pick up anything that, like, he could pick up in life. If it was too heavy for him to pick up in life, then chances are he's not going to be able to pick it up as a ghost. Just kind of some supernatural logic right there. But yeah, when people, like, see this stuff moving, once again, they can't see Kenny, so they just see the thing moving on its own. So he can interact with most things, but nobody knows it's him. What does the military look like in the station, and how does the base look like? Well, the Global Defense Force, we've already seen in Chapter 1. The military is very just thrown together. Very, very limited funding, and they're scrambling for supplies and things like that. So, basically the soldiers have to supply their own armor, so that's why Sora and Solaris kind of just look like hell. Solaris has his own little, like, welding goggles that he's repurposed to use as, like, eye protection. Solaris just kind of lifts his scarf over his muzzle to to keep smoke out. Basically people have to outfit themselves because the GDF doesn't have enough equipment and they don't have enough resources to get equipment for these people. It's basically, like I said, a last-ditch hodgepodge effort to protect people, and essentially it most of the time boils down to throwing enough people at the infernals to save more people. Water is really effective in keeping the infernals out, but when like the power runs out, or when the water source runs out, the infernals just keep coming. There just seem to be endless amounts of them to everybody in the mortal realm, so it's looking pretty hopeless for them. But yeah. Question about the infernals: if they are tameable, what do I need to tame them? Yeah. Sorry, but they're not tameable. Here we go. Are there sometimes groups like clans or bandits, and are there cars or people who like ride animals? Yeah, people will ride horses and things like that. Usually, though, animals get killed and eaten. Some people still keep pets and things like that. Chickens and sheep and things like that are livestock, you know. They keep that stuff, but it's really hard to keep them underground for very long, so usually those poor animals are crammed into tight spaces, and the people are also in tight spaces, so there's really not much they can do about that. Sometimes when, like, resource hunting parties go out into the overworld, they'll hunt for game and things like that. Right, cars. So, the GDF does have some machinery, like, they used to have tanks, but most of the tanks blew up. There is stuff like, Sora actually owns a truck. He's one of the few people who owns, like, a car, and it's simply because, he used to be a mechanic before TCotC started. I'll get more into that in his character, in the character video that's coming up soon. But, Sora actually owns a truck, so cars do exist, people do have them, but they're a rarity because they're so easy to blow up. In what year is TCotC going on? So, TCotC officially takes place in, like, the 2030s, I guess you could say. And that's simply because of things like, timing and whatnot, and how old I was when, I first cooked up things and stuff like that. So, it's basically just a random year. Yeah, the 2030s is essentially where it is. There you go. Can a person learn magic or start to learn magic? And if yes, what are the first steps? So, like I mentioned in the lore video, people have different mana levels in their bodies, and so they're able to basically disperse that mana in certain stuff to harness, like, the natural world around them. So, like, mana can be used to generate fire magic or water magic and things like that, but it's all from the natural world. So, like, water magic is basically the person's mana affecting the water vapor in the air. So, they'll, like, pull water out of the air, and so the air around them will suddenly dry out, but they'll have, like, a ball of water in their hands, and they're able to, like, control that sort of thing. Whereas with fire, it's a little harder because that's basically just pure mana right there. Same thing with, like, the infernal situation. They're just radiating pure mana, and that leads to combustion, and so it's basically a very volatile combustion reaction that goes off, and things like that. So yeah, they're able to generate, like, elemental powers, but it's all by affecting the natural world around them with their mana. And the first steps to using magic, therefore, are just learning how to, like, channel your mana properly. What is the money system? So the money system, it's pretty shit. The worldwide economy has plummeted, obviously, with this whole deal, and most people just barter to get by. People trade anything for supplies and whatnot. Bullets are worth their weight in gold in this world because they can be used to kill an infernal. Some people will probably look at you a little crazy if you offer them coins, because coins have basically become worthless in this world, because, like I said, there's really no economy. So people just essentially just trade supplies with one another in order to get by. And is there still wildlife? Yes, so like I mentioned in the lore video, the Infernals have this very, very weird habit to stick around civilized areas. They will eat wildlife along with humans, but for some reason they haven't, like, encroached into the wilderness, so that is one place people can survive if they flee civilized areas. But like, there is wilderness out there still, like, you can still find forests and things like that, grasslands, all that, and there are animals living there, and I would go as far as to say that a lot of animals have increased in population since the whole infernal outbreak started. What uniform are the military people in the stations wearing? So once again, I mentioned this in an earlier answer. Basically, people have to supply their own uniforms. They don't have a set uniform. The military literally cannot afford to, like, give out stuff like that because they don't have enough resources. Do trains still exist out there? Yes, trains still exist. Whether or not they function is a different story entirely. Transport between the GDF stations is usually made by boat, since most of them are on the coast and things like that. And so they don't really use trains so much anymore because they don't really have the power to keep them going. If they had, like, subway systems, that's definitely something worth looking into because the Infernals, once again, don't like being underground. So subway systems could be a thing. It's just a problem of how wealthy that particular GDF station is and things like that, because Station NA1 is really, really struggling. But other stations, like on the other side of the world, might be doing really, really good. And so they might have the option to build, like, subways and things like that. It's just a matter of where can they get the power for that sort of thing. What is Yakari for a species? For me, he looks like a dragon. Yakari is a very, very interesting case. I'm just gonna be real with you. He's just a monster. I literally don't know what he is anymore. He started out as, like, an alien thing, and then I kind of backed out of that idea because that doesn't really make sense in, like, a setting of magic and monsters for an alien to be there all of a sudden. Maybe it's like a World of Warcraft sort of situation. Like, World of Warcraft, you've got magic and monsters, and then you've got literal aliens like the Draenei, I should say. Frick, I don't even know which one is right, but the Draenei, they came from outer space, and they landed on, like, the planet that World of Warcraft takes place on. And so, yeah, I guess he could technically be an alien in that respect. I'm gonna be real with you, I have no idea what the fuck he is anymore. Okay. What are exactly stations? Are those cities that are guarded with something? So, like I mentioned in the last video, stations are essentially underground colonies to help protect people. Are phones still existing, and what happens if I'm in danger outside? Can I call for help from the stations, or am I alone out there? So phones do exist, but like, cell phones don't work anymore because a lot of the radio towers have been completely, like, abandoned, or, they've been destroyed. So, for communication via phones, most of them are now back to being landlines because, once again, all that stuff has been destroyed, and the overworld is just kind of a wasteland. Since it's a wasteland out there, how do they get water? So, water is, like I said, water keeps Infernals at bay. They aren't going to go near water. The ocean is safe. Rivers and lakes and things like that are safe. And there's also groundwater. So water is a thing. It's just a matter of, like, hooking it up and making plumbing a possibility again. I really don't want to have to be the plumber in a cramped station like that. Oh, man. Just thinking about that. Is there still existing electricity? Yep, I answered that in an earlier answer. Are there still existing monuments from the past, like the Eiffel Tower? Yes, a lot of monuments from the past are still there, but they're in ruins. So, like, you think of the Empire State Building, or the Washington Monument, or like the Chicago Bean, or like the Great Wall of China is a good example, and the Eiffel Tower, Big Ben. A lot of those places are still kind of a thing, but they're in ruins. Like, I imagine Big Ben kind of just got burnt down to, like, whatever metal was left in that tower. The Chicago Bean is probably trashed. Buildings and things like that were most likely burned for whatever wood or drywall they had in them, and then if they had any metal with them that was sort of safe, I guess you could say. And if they weren't burned, because sometimes the Infernals will avoid certain areas and you'll stumble across like a completely intact house. If you encounter things like that, they'll most likely be overgrown with vegetation, because it only takes a couple years for things to grow over. And so, and the crisis has been going on for like 5 to 10 years at this point, so... Actually, no, it's been 10 years since the crisis began, so yeah, there's a lot of overgrowth and things like that. What happened to Ace that he is not more in the, like, military of the station? Did something happen there? Ace is the director of the station. He's, like, the head of the military operations in the station. I don't know what you mean by that. Do they have communication with other stations in the world? Yes, very limited though. Once again, a lot of travel between station is by boat, and phone communications, like I said, are limited mostly to landlines and things like that, so there is communication, but it's extremely limited. What have I not answered yet here? What happens, like, if a mage is doing evil stuff in the city? How are they going on it? Do they have something to silence magic, or they just ban them from the city? Once again, magic is a completely new thing to these people. There are mages that have been involved in the city in the past. In Station NA1, mages are actually not regarded as a good thing. A lot of people are scared of mages because, one very prominent mage, went a little crazy and basically did a lot of damage around the station. I will get to that in the character video, don't worry. If you guys remember from Chapter 1, Solaris mentions somebody he used to know who kind of just seemed to snap one day. That guy was a mage, and so because of things he did, people don't really like magic there anymore. You are sort of allowed to use magic there if you can figure out how to use it, but people are gonna look at you funny for it. They're gonna look at you like you're a criminal or you're potentially dangerous because they've seen what bad people using magic can do. If the mage is doing something bad, the station really can't do too much about it because magic is so much stronger than a lot of the technology they have. Obviously, if somebody gets shot, then that's the end of them, but mages have the ability to literally manipulate the natural world around them, so they can stop bullets, for crying out loud. So a mage that knows what they're doing is such a big threat that the GDF really can't do much about it. And so the mage that I mentioned just a minute ago was able to flee the station without really having any harm come to him. Did Kenny have to find out he was a ghost, or did he already know? Oh, poor Kenny. Yes, he actually did have to find out he was a ghost. When he was initially, I'm not sure how to explain this without giving away spoilers. When he first, I guess, became a ghost, he didn't realize it at first, and he could still interact with a lot of things, but nobody seemed to notice him. And then he learned that people just walked right through him. They didn't see him. He was incorporeal, and so that's how he learned he was a ghost, and it really wasn't a fun time for the poor little guy. If you guys have seen his profile, he was like 11 when he turned into a ghost, and so if you can imagine the kind of stuff the kind of psychological effects that would have on a child, it really messed him up. What do Solaris, Kenny, and Ace do in their free time? Solaris kind of just sleeps every time he's not at the academy. going to the GDF Academy takes up most of his day. Basically, it's kind of like going to like the Air Force Base or something like that. These guys are training constantly and taking classes to make sure they know what they're doing. So Solaris basically just sleeps in his free time. He also likes to hang out with Sora and guys like that, but he really doesn't know what he's doing in this modern age. Even after being here for a little while, he still misses the ancient world, and so he kind of just keeps to himself a whole lot. Kenny, obviously as a ghost, can't really do much. He basically follows Solaris around because he knows Solaris, because they were once part of a family, and so Kenny follows Solaris around, and he'll actually sometimes follow Ace around too, but he's more interested in Solaris because Solaris is so down on his luck. Ace to Kenny seems like he's doing fine, so he wants to follow Solaris to make sure Solaris doesn't get himself into trouble. Ace, for the most part, also keeps to himself. He does a lot of paperwork and things like that, since he's the head of the military in the station that these guys are in. So, yeah, it's really not fun for him in his free time, and Solaris doesn't really do much of anything that is fun. Kenny, since he's a ghost, could technically fly, so I imagine if he gets really bored, he could actually just, fly all around the base and stuff like that. That's kind of cute to think about. That is all the questions we have. So, you guys, that was TCotC Q&A. I hope I answered all of you guys' questions. There were a lot of repeat questions and tangent questions tied to a lot of these questions, and so if I had already answered your question in a previous answer, I just didn't address that question. So, I'm sorry if you didn't hear your exact question being asked, but I made sure that I covered all fronts. So, there you go. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this little Q&A session. I hope it satisfied your curious appetites for now. And I hope you guys have a great night.